We're now joined by Kendall Kaut. He's been in Kansas City for the Big 12 men's and women's basketball media days, including today. And Kendall, thanks for your time. I want to start with yesterday. You were around that clump of people when Brett Yormark was discussing some things about the conference in the future. Anything in particular that was what stood out most to you? Because it seemed like the main thing was that Texas and OU were staying, and we've discussed that for the last 24 hours.
Yeah, Smokey always happy to be on. He did mention that he expects OU and Texas to stay. Obviously, with OU and Texas, you can trust them until in the middle of the night they're telling you they're going to the SEC. So we all know what it's worth when OU and Texas give you their word. But on the flip side, it is a long negotiated process if you want to leave the conference. And so for neither of them to have approached the Big 12 yet about wanting to leave early, sign that both programs are okay, waiting out the next 2 years in the conference. And then if you're Oklahoma, I don't know what in the world you'd want to do to get to the SEC any faster. I mean, if you can't score a point on Texas in the Big 12, you're probably not going to score any points on them in the SEC.
Kendall, are you just trying to stir that fire pit again? Are you oh, my Lord. Kendall was very low on Oklahoma.
No, but Kendall, you did. You have some Twitter receipts from people I know, and I contacted you at the KU game when it did. But did you ever clap back, or did you just decide to let it go?
No, I would never let it go. Those people were vile to me. They said insulting things, and so some people say when they go low, we go high. I go even lower, and so I wish Oklahoma the best. I think someday they might get bowl eligible again, but probably not this year. But I wish them the best. They'll always have that time they lost by 28 or 35 to LSU in the playoffs.
Kendall, so this is the best basketball conference in the country, and I heard Bill Self say today about, look, you're in the last 3 national championship games, you've won 2 of them. It has gotten deeper, it has gotten better. Where do you think Baylor stands among that as they try to get back to the Final Four?
I think you can make an argument for any of Baylor, KU, Texas, or TCU is the best team in the conference. But I think the strongest argument is that either Baylor or KU is the top team in the league. I saw Adam Flagler today. The guy's jacked. Never seen him that big. He'd been working out with Jared Butler this summer. He told me lifting well, playing well. I talked to John Jacobs a few weeks back, and he said Adam's been exclusively running the point. He's been playing extremely well for the Bears this season. So I think Baylor should be favored. The coaches picked him to win the league. The front court remains a bit of a question, but we saw Flo Thamba really stepped up after Jonathan Tchamwa-Tchatchoua went out last season. So I think on paper, the Bears are the best team in the league. Obviously, having to go to Allen Fieldhouse with how good KU could be, if everything comes together, makes that a little dicey. But TCU and Texas are going to be really good as well. And then once again, maybe you can make the argument K-State or Iowa State won't be very good, but I think every team in the Big 12 is a top 80 team nationally. So it's really about avoiding those losses when you play a team that's closer to 80 and a team that's closer to 10.
Kendall, was there any particular team or storyline or coach that you were looking forward to maybe talking to or hearing something from based on just off-season angles and storylines? Is there anything that was particularly top of mind for you heading into the media days?
Craig, I got a chance to ask Mike Boynton in the main section about, does it feel unfair to you that you all had to miss a year of NCAA tournament play for an assistant coach giving Jeffrey Carroll $1,000 who wasn't even on your staff at the time, and Memphis has multiple level 1 violations. I didn't mention KU, but I think that was kind of unstated in the question. And Mike Boynton just mentioned, he said it sucks that we're going to be a footnote of history that I think will be the last team to ever have a postseason tournament ban. But he mentioned that he was happy that that's going to be the case because he felt it's unfair that the kids are punished when it's the coaches doing things. So I was interested in how he would respond to it. And, it's an admirable stance to have for Mike Boynton. But he did reiterate that it was very unfair. And I think I agree with him what happened to the Cowboys on that front.
So with what Baylor has, and it appears Flagler, Cryer, and also Langston Love, after the torment of injuries that they dealt with last year, and Love was out for the year, that they all have gone through the process, the offseason, and they're back, obviously, and healthy. And then you add Keontae George. How do you split up, and I know there's others, but how do you split up the guard play and who plays where?
And this is a question I've asked kind of consistently, both of Scott Drew today, the 3 guards who were at media days, John Jacobs, some of the graduate assistants I talked to, and there are, I think, 2 cases you can make. The first is that you know how good Adam Flagler, LJ Cryer, Keontae George will all be. Just play them 35 minutes a night and deal with that. The second one, though, is you maybe just play them 30 minutes a night, get Dale Bonner involved. LJ Cryer and Adam Flagler both said he's by far the most improved guy on the roster. And then Langston Love, as you mentioned, Smokey, a high 4-star recruit, set out last season. You have all those bridges. There are a lot of ways you can kind of reach the solution that are pretty good. I think ultimately I would lean toward I don't want to have Adam Flagler, Keontae George, or LJ Cryer off the court, but I think there are a lot of different ways that this team can succeed.
Texas Tech's ranked 25th, and that surprised me because we know how good they are at home and also what the coach is building and what he's built there. But, yeah, they lost McCullough to a competitor in Kansas, among some others as well. Why are they low? Is that low or is that about where you expect them to be?
I think it's kind of a fair compromise ranking, Smokey. I think you can make the argument Tech should be top 15. Mark Adams is a defensive genius. Kept the program rolling last year when people thought they might fall off. Davion Harmon transfers in from Oregon after playing at Oklahoma, where he was a really good player. Kevin O'Banner didn't shoot quite as well as he wanted to last season, but probably will only get better in the second season after bringing Oral Roberts. We know how loud they make it at United Supermarkets Arena. So I think there's a fair case for that. On the flip side, if you live by the transfer portal, some season you'll die by the transfer portal, and that's a lot of new guys for him. Major injury on the roster already to open the season. So I think 25 is a fair place. I know the Tech faithful are very active on Twitter, and I can only fight with one Big 12 fan base at a time. So I don't want to fight Tech. I think it's reasonable. You should be ranked higher. I wish you all the best in life. I have no qualms with you being ranked higher, but I think it's also fair to rank them 25th.
Kendall, can Texas be more cohesive this year? Because last year, they were a good team, but their problem was it took them, 20 games or so to really feel out who they were supposed to be.
I think it's possible, Paul. It really comes down, I think, for Texas to how well they shoot from three. They bring in Tyrese Hunter, the star guard from Iowa State, who was able to foist him into the Sweet 16 last year with a roster that probably wasn't Sweet 16 quality. Marcus Carr probably underachieved last season. So you figure a bounce back from him, where he looks more like the player he was at Minnesota, mixed with Hunter, could be a really good team. But concurrently, you got the problem that if they're team 150 in three-point percentage, people pack it in the paint. Maybe the fouls aren't called quite as tightly as they want them to get called in Austin. Maybe Texas is 11-7 again this year, and maybe a tier below the Baylor, KU, and even TCU's of the world. But I do see a world where Texas underachieved last year. Year two now for Chris Beard there. Tyrese Hunter's a great player. Carr rebounds, and they could be a real force in this league.
Kendall, where's your Keontae George stock at this point?
Greg, it's very high. And when I talked to him today, it was clear that they've really got Keontae George NBA ready. You asked him a question. I was like, hey, what's your favorite thing to do at Waco that's not playing basketball? And he's like, oh. And so he's got I got 8 answers I need to give. They're not going to cancel me before he gets the NBA ready to go. But his gameplay is incredible. I asked Scott Drew about him as a freshman. Certainly Quincy Miller, Jared Butler, Perry Jones, Isaiah Austin. There have been a bevy of talented freshmen that have come through Baylor. But Drew recognized, and I think most people recognize, he was the pick of the Athletic in the media poll I participated in as the Big 12 Player of the Year, that he could be a really good player. He could be dominant, and he might be the best freshman Baylor's ever had. And I think he's very likely to be a top 10 pick in the next NBA draft.
So how and where does Caleb Lohner fit into this? I watched the games they played up in Canada. They were kind of, I don't want to use the word I wanted to say was like dysfunctional, because again, some of those guys just met each other, and it was great that they got to play those games and learn from each other. They were missing players, but I didn't quite know really what his role is going to be. Thought he would be more physical. We had him on earlier this week, or last week. Is he going to be a power forward type guy, whatever you want to call him, a 4, a 5, whatever?
Yeah, so Smokey, I think he'll begin the year playing primarily the 4. I had a chance to ask both Scott and the players today about, is Caleb Lohner going to be more of a small ball 5, kind of like Mark Vidal was in what I dubbed those 5-hole lineups, America's best lineup or America's hero. And so Lohner's three-point shot wasn't quite what he wanted at BYU. We know about the injuries he'd had. But I think ultimately, and Scott Drew kind of got into this, if they think by the end of the year they'll close some games with Lohner as a 5, that'll improve their spacing. They plan to play more of everyone outside the three-point line this season, because Scott Drew reiterated to me and kind of like looked me in the eye and said, we really can shoot the ball this season. And so I think if you add one more weapon to the court, they'll want to close games with Caleb Lohner. And even if the opponent can run down and make it 2, they're going to make so many threes, they'll live with that trade-off. So end of the year, I think Lohner closes games a lot at the 5. But Drew also told me today that, Flo Thamba, really good. He was great for us at the end of last season. And that Josh O is who he thinks might be the most improved guy from the start of the year to the end of the year.
Kendall, you also watch what Baylor football's done. And on occasion, you'll sit there and put something out about what you see, the trends you see. What, from your perspective, obviously they are who their record says they are, but from your perspective, what's missing?
Sure, and so I got to, own a little bit up to this. I didn't think Baylor would be a playoff team, but I thought they would be in the Big 12 championship game before the season. I think I really underestimated how much the secondary would take a step back. We certainly knew how talented Jalen Petrie is and how excellent he's been for the Texans this season, and what Terrell Bernard would be to replace. But the secondary, I think, has been a real disappointment for the Bears. I don't know if that means new personnel. I don't know if that means they want to switch up coverages this late in the campaign. But I think the secondary not living up to expectations has really hampered them. I'd be shocked if Baylor made it back to Arlington this season, but Baylor's, turned it around on a dime before, and hopefully they can do so again.
Do you think that the defensive line has hurt that secondary a little bit?
I think they have a little bit, Paul. I don't think they've lived up to expectations. I think entering the year, it seemed like Baylor had one of the two best defensive lines in the country. And, Travis knows far more about football than me, but I think even he would recognize this is probably closer to defensive line 25. And it would be kind of like if Baylor basketball's backcourt finished at 25. A lot of years you could say, well, that's pretty good, top 25 backcourt. But when you expect to have a top 2 or 3 backcourt, or you expect to have a top 2 or 3 defensive line, your defensive line 25, that really doesn't help out a young secondary. So I think everything defensively has really been a disappointment. I think the secondary sticks out to me as the most disappointing. The defensive line certainly has their share of blame as well.
You were also at Women's Media Day, which was yesterday, and obviously there's been a little bit of a shift. And Baylor ranked outside, I think, the top 10, and Texas is like 2 or 3 in what they have and winning the championship, the tournament, at least last year. Anything from that you gained?
I think I gained that they really don't care at all about their ranking. They're focused on a lot of other stuff. And so I think they're okay with it. I was shocked Baylor was picked fourth. I think if you win 12 straight conference titles, kind of like when KU was doing that on the men's side, you should just pick them every year until they don't win it. But they seem pretty focused on what they have, obviously with the incoming Big 12 newcomer of the year from Missouri, incoming Big 12 freshman of the year, certainly losing 2 top 10 picks to the W, as I found out that's the abbreviation they call it, which I thought was really cool. Losing 2 top 10 picks to the W hurts the Bears. But with what they have coming back, what they've added, I still think Baylor should be the favorites in women's basketball.
Kendall, thank you. Be careful. Kendall Kaut with us, SicEm365, college basketball writer and analyst, and does a great job covering not just Baylor, but the entire Big 12, and then also what he does and brings in to the table.